He opened with the modest 1, e4, to which his opponent, Shamsuddin, replied with e5, expecting some standard classical setup, but then came to k5. Already on the second move, Magnus revealed exactly what he thought of his opponent. I'd like to pause here and analyze the body language of the players. After playing qh5, Magnus immediately covered his face with his hand. That's a sign of shame. He was embarrassed by what he had just played. Shamsuddin, meanwhile, almost jumped in his chair and puckered his lips, clearly showing he had no idea what was going on. In truth, it's a sign of disrespect to play like this in a serious tournament game. After 2, and c6, Magnus continued his plan, trying to set up a scholar's mate with 3, bc4. Naturally, his opponent spotted the threat and played 3, g6. Magnus retreated his queen, once again eyeing the vulnerable f7 square and threatening mate. Here, any solid Class C player would calmly defend with nf6, covering the mate and continuing development. But Shamsuddin was sitting across from the world champion. He was nervous, and so he tried to play as solidly as possible. Instead of the natural defense, he played 3, k7, a very awkward move. Even Magnus was surprised and thought for a few seconds before continuing with the logical developing move 4, nf3. From this moment the players slowed down, so let's just follow the course of the game. Shamsuddin continued with nf6, Magnus played 5, d3, then bg7, 6, and c3, and then a little prophylaxis with h6, trying to stop a possible g5 that could have led to a nasty n5. But Magnus, without any delay, planted his knight right on d5. After the exchange cx d5 x5, the question arose, where should Black's knight go? Shamsuddin chose the worst path, retreating to the edge with now 5. Much better would have been to fight in the center with and 4, trade off some pieces, maybe even reach an endgame. That would have dried up the position nicely. Still, he picked the wrong opponent to test this against. Magnus found the strongest response. d6. A pawn sacrifice that forces Black to double their pawns in the center. Black couldn't take with the queen because of a capture on f7, so after bxd5, it became clear that Black would struggle enormously to finish developing the queenside. The knight on a5 turned out to be completely misplaced. Black hurried to bring it back, but Magnus calmly played bd2, and when Black tried to trade queens with qf6, Magnus refused with qe4. Castles followed on both sides, and then ne7, an attempt to trade off this bishop and finally complete development. But White cynically ignores these threats and plays nc3. Indeed, if Black captures our bishop, then we get an even more powerful knight on d5. That's why the young talent from Uzbekistan doesn't rush, instead playing qf5. Though honestly, that move doesn't really fit my flattering description of him as a young talent, because after it, White simply gets a large advantage. The better plan was rb8, and for example after f for b5 we ignore White's ideas, and simply try to finish our own development. After qf5, Magnus responded with qb4, and now the pawn on d6 is hanging. That's why the Black queen should never have left f6, because there it protected the pawn. And after the move n5, which happened in the game, the fork on e7 looms. Black is forced to move the king, then came nc7, attacking the rook, and after qx d6 material balance was restored. But the harmony in Black's position was completely gone. The pieces were scattered all over the place with no coordination. The light-squared bishop in particular had no way to develop. Here, after the move, b6, we reached the first truly critical moment. And Magnus Carlsen failed to find the winning continuation. The world champion instead played f3, simply stopping Black's pawn from advancing to e4. But there was a far more spectacular option. This is where you, dear friend, should pause the video and try to find the move that even Magnus Carlsen missed. So, did you find it? It wasn't an easy task, even the world champion failed here. But if you spotted it, then you're at least more talented than the writers of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. The move was an e8. What's the idea? We attacked the rook while at the same time cutting off the vital connection between Black's rooks. That means a move like ba6 no longer protects the rook because the rooks are no longer linked. We can simply take on b8. Black is forced to move the rook, and then the knight completes its dirty work by capturing the bishop. After that, the finishing blow comes, bxe6+. Then we pick up the rook and emerge with an extra exchange, an extra pawn, and a completely winning position. But Magnus didn't see any of this. Instead, he played the modest f3. They had been wandering in enemy territory for too long. As the saying goes, after a good walk, it's time to know your place. It was high time to retreat the pieces to safety. But Magnus felt perfectly at home on enemy soil, and he played bc3. That move was the fatal mistake. After bf8, it suddenly became clear that the white knight was lost. The white queen had no escape squares except to capture the pawn on e5, but then black would simply exchange queens and play d6. Both the bishop and the knight would be hanging, and white would lose a piece. At this point, Magnus completely collapsed. He lost his composure and decided that his best chance was to continue without the queen. He played in b5, using a fork to at least capture the rook on c8, but ultimately he was left without his queen. Material balance. A queen against a rook. That's, of course, a completely hopeless ratio. From here on, Magnus tried to resist, wriggling in every way he could, but it was all in vain. Black captured the pawn on h2, and with the cruel move, d4, Bakidov sealed Magnus's fate. The world champion resigned, and believe me, it wasn't premature. After the capture, white would simply be mated, q1 plus kf4, g5 checkmate. Magnus decided not to give his opponent the satisfaction of delivering mate and ended the game early. And so, as we can see, the tournament began in a truly catastrophic fashion for the world champion, 0 out of 2. After such a painful defeat, Magnus immediately stormed out into the streets of St. Petersburg to cool his head. And with that, I thank you for your attention, dear friends. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel.